with blood cancer, but there are not enough donors to match the need. My name is Isasipinko Ndingi, and today I'll be hosting this conversation, why do you need to be a donor? And today I'm having X Hlongwane, who is the Western Cape and KZN DKMS donor recruitment team leader, to have this conversation and share the information with the entire populace of the Wesley Guild and the people who are not part of the Wesley Guild but are also tuned in today. As your host today, I welcome you with love, light, and peace to join us today in having the conversation. Bukolani, hi, how are you?
Good afternoon, Issa. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm very well, thanks. I suppose this is time when I say good afternoon to everybody who's streaming online and listening to us, and we say welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with us and giving the opportunity to our viewers to learn more and ask you questions about what it means to be a blood donor and everything else that we'll be having a conversation on today. We really appreciate your time that you've made for us.
No problem. I think it's a conversation that we all owe to have, given the current status of people who are diagnosed with blood cancer and blood disorders. I think it's a relevant conversation as African communities and community leaders and people who have a social standing to really start engaging on this matter, because it's going to be a matter that's going to be with us for a very long time.
Thank you for that. I mean, I attended the launch a week before last, and with the campaign that was here in Centurion, and I sat there and thought, how come don't I know anyone with cancer within my sector in my community? Is it because we don't have it? What's going on? I think for me, that was the moment where everything was just like, okay, hang on, what's going on? Is there something that is not happening that is supposed to be happening? And that's when I thought the conversation ought to be taking place, because one, it's not possible that with my huge circle and my community, my family members, that we have been so lucky that no one has been diagnosed with cancer, be it blood cancer or whatever type. And that in my old age, I haven't encountered anyone with cancer in close proximity. It made me question the knowledge and education around it. Could it be that some of my family members or friends have been having symptoms, but we never know? And today, that's why we're having this conversation, because I was just like, there's something wrong. Something is not making sense.
Yeah. I think we need to be very careful in terms of how we speak about cancer as a whole, because I think, especially in the African community, when people have symptoms of blood cancer, to be more specific, the symptoms are not far between symptoms that one would have when they have flu.
Okay.
So it's a topic that we need to be very careful about, and mostly African people get to hospital at a very late stage, misdiagnosed, they've treated something else, and later realize that they have been, or they are misdiagnosed. So I think the conversation we're going to have today is really just to build the foundation, one, of creating an awareness and educating people around blood cancer and blood disorders. Two, about really encouraging people to become blood stem cell donors, and also to eliminate the myths that surround blood stem cell donation.
That is really needed. Sorry. Just in what you're saying before we get to you giving a background, I think having watched a lot of series around medicine and the amount of misdiagnosed among Black communities, it's quite a saddening issue that we would maybe have a conversation on it many other days as to why are we in this space where there's misdiagnosis? Is something common across races? Is it something within the Black communities? But anyway, you are part of the DKMS, which is the community that is very fighting so hard to give a second chance to people who find themselves being diagnosed with blood cancer or other blood disorders. And at that moment, they need someone in their corner, and you guys become that. Please give us a background on DKMS.
So DKMS is a non-profit organization. We work to fight blood diseases and blood cancer. And we do this through recruiting well-informed and dedicated blood stem cell donors to be donors onto the DKMS Africa registry. And we say we give a second chance at life to patients diagnosed with blood disorders and blood cancer, simply because when they get to what we call a blood stem cell transplant stage, through the donors that we have been able to recruit, they are then able to find transplant matches who are then able to really give them a second chance at life.
Which is a beautiful thing that people are doing. And I wish I had known earlier that I could do that. Again, I only just went through the process myself. I didn't know. And that's also another question I have. Is like, I didn't know there's something like this exists. I've seen leukemia on the series I've watched and all of that, but it just doesn't make sense. You're watching and you're not registering is what it means to your immediate community. But Xhlongwane, can you please take us through as to what is blood cancer and what is blood disorder?
Okay, so blood cancer is a blood forming of tissues that hinder the body from the ability to fight infections. So it's cancer that you find in the bloodstream of a patient. And a blood disorder is when your blood prevents itself from being able to do its functions, where a blood disorder can cause your blood not to produce the relevant cells that are needed in order for it to be able to produce the relevant duties of what your blood does on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Those two, the differences. Can one with a blood disorder develop blood cancer over time if it's not treated?
Not really. Remember, when you have a blood disorder, you have a dysfunctioning of your blood. So your blood is not doing the work that it's supposed to do. So you'll sit within the blood disorder group, and somebody who has a blood cancer will sit within the blood cancer group. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So can you take us through on the different types of blood disorders that are there, and also with blood cancer, and in their variations and how they affect a person's functionality? So I think it's important to highlight the fact that blood cancer is leukemia.
Okay.
So leukemia sits as your blood cancer, and your blood disorders vary. There's various other types of blood disorders that are there. I think the list goes around about 70 types of blood disorders. The most common ones that people will come to know would be anemia, where it's either Fanconi anemia or aplastic anemia. Hemophilia, sickle cell disease, thalassemia. So all of these fall in the range of blood disorders. And like I mentioned, there are various types of blood disorders, all meaning that the blood is unable to perform a certain part or a certain function. Therefore, it is called a blood disorder.
Okay. So one would then need the transfusion, which would be our next question as to, okay, I'm diagnosed with blood cancer or blood disorder. What do I do? What's happening?
The first thing we always encourage our patients to do is that when diagnosed with a blood disorder or a blood cancer, seek help with obviously going through and seeing specialists who specialize in hematology work. So it's doctors who deal with blood-related diseases. They are the best people to take you through the treatment plan that one should be able to undergo in order for them to be able to find a better life and to find a cure. They're the best people. Where we stand as DKMS, we do not offer treatment plans for blood cancer or blood disorders. However, we recruit donors who then become accessible to patients who are suffering from blood disorders or blood cancer when they need to have a blood stem cell transplant. So we never really give treatment plans to patients. The treatment plans, as I've mentioned, we always encourage people to speak to their treating doctors, whether it's a hematology doctor or oncologist. They are the people who will be able to give the best direction in terms of what treatment is suitable for the disease that the patient has.
Okay. Now you've seen your oncologist. Is having blood stem cells or bone marrow being donated the first thing that happens, or are there ways where patients are then given certain lifestyle advices on how they can work around it, or is you having the transfusion a better solution into fighting the disorder or the cancer?
So with regards to treatment, when it comes to blood stem cell transplantation only happens at the end period of either chemotherapy, radiation, blood transfusion, the various treatment plans that the doctor will put their patient on. This will then mean when they've completed that treatment plan, the doctor will then advise whether it is needed for their patient to be transplanted. Remember, not every patient that is diagnosed with a blood disease or a blood cancer requires to be transplanted, but many more of them do reach transplant stage and are required to be transplanted. We are seeing more and more number of patients, especially in our African community, who reach transplant stage and unfortunately are unable to be transplanted due to the fact that we don't have enough donors on the registry to be able to support.
Okay, that is a sad reality that we're currently facing today, and which prompts the conversation we're having today. Just please explain to us then, what is the difference between a stem cell and the bone marrow, and which one comes first? Or do they work the same way, or they work in different ends?
So a blood stem cell transplant is a transplant of your stem cells. The stem cells are created by your bone marrow. They are then filtered through onto your bloodstream. So the collection of stem cells will be done via an apheresis process, which means it will be a drawing of the blood from the one arm, and the blood will run through a stem cell separating machine, which will separate the stem cells from your bloodstream, and the rest of the blood will flow back onto the other arm. And that is the common treatment that we are using, even in South Africa, where we offer blood stem cell transplantation to patients. That does not mean, though, that a bone marrow transplant cannot be done, which is generally done for children. And the bone marrow transplant will obviously, it will be a suction that will be done from the donor's bone marrow. But I think what we need to clarify is, as DKMS, as we stand at the moment, we are encouraging people to become blood stem cell donors. We are encouraging donors to have an understanding that when you sign up as a blood stem cell donor, there is no surgical requirement. We do not operate you. The process is fairly easy and fairly safe, given the fact that DKMS has done over 100,000 transplants globally. So, it comes to show when you look at the stats that it's quite a safe procedure. It's it's been successful. We have had patients who have been successfully transplanted and who live today to tell the story that they were once diagnosed with blood diseases or they were once diagnosed with blood cancer.
Okay, at least that is giving hope in society that people are donating and people it's really something they can do. Because I think also that sometimes when, again, for us people who love series and all of that, if you see the process, it might be quite scary for most people. And I'm glad that you actually clarified that it's not as it looks like on TV, because mostly you find out that families will go as far as being pregnant, but making sure that the child will one day be a donor to the living child. So one would then have those ideas that that's something that would happen. So if you're saying it's mostly bone marrow, it's for children, how common is it among children? And is there a point where adults also would be in a position where they need it, or it's mostly fairly common among children?
So bone marrow transplant is very common amongst children. However, that does not mean that a child cannot receive a blood stem cell transplant. And that is a decision that sits primarily with the treating doctor, with the treating transplant doctor, who will then advise what is the best treatment solution for their patient.
All right, thank you very much. So with the transplant and you collecting, you had mentioned that they separate the stem cell from the blood and it's returned to your body while collecting the stem cell. When it's being returned again, is it does it become effective again? Can my body reproduce the stem cell that have been given to someone else?
No. Isa, your body has a special way of functioning. It will always produce the cells that are produced by the body. It never gets to a point of running out from the production. So when we harvest the stem cells from the donor, we take stem cells that are sufficient and that are enough for the patient that is in need of a transplant, and the body of the donor will recover itself immediately. The donor will then be able to then start making stem cells again as a normal process. Remember that when we take the stem cells from the donor, we never deplete what the donor has, which is why it's very important for us to be able to have an understanding of, and when we take our donors through the application form, we always make sure that the weight and the height of the donor is listed so that we are able to then assess in terms of donation processes who can be able to donate to who, so that we are able to guide our donors in a very in a good way. Because remember, as much as we stand for the rights of the patients, we also look after and take great pride in our donors, because without our donors, we are then unable to provide the service that we need to for the community or for the people or patients who are diagnosed with blood diseases or blood cancer.
Okay. With that, let's say I go and I become a donor. How many times can I donate as a person?
So our donors often always donate once because the transplant is done once to the patient. However, we do, after donating, block our donors on the system so that they are not able to match another patient. And this is done primarily so that should the patient that you are donating for relapse and requires to have another transplant, that we do know that the identified donor is still available to be able to do a top-up for the patient.
Okay. Just to revert back on a question I think I should have addressed earlier, is what are the causes, both on blood disorders and blood cancer, on the spectrum of, is it something that is genetic, or is it something that someone can develop later on in their lives, maybe purely because of how they eat and all these other different things?
Issa, we always refrain from having to answer questions like that because we are not doctors. Okay. But I can guarantee you that some blood disorders are genetically passed on to generations that follow, and blood cancer does not necessarily happen or develop in a patient because there is history. A patient can be diagnosed with blood cancer having no history in the family of having blood cancer. Okay,
that makes it more tricky. So because it means anyone and everyone can be susceptible to having the disease, and over time a person can find themselves in this position. So just before we go to other question, as a person, and you're saying in Black communities, this becomes a different story altogether. People are misdiagnosed. They get diagnosed very late in their lives. What could you say can be done to mitigate this and be proactive in the process?
I think the first things that we have to highlight, and we have to make the people who are listening on the call to be aware of, is the fact that blood cancer or blood disorders know no gender, they know no age, they know no race. I want to really focus on the fact that to date, we are seeing more and more African people diagnosed with blood cancer and blood disorders. It is a scary fact. And yes, we are seeing more and more of them get to hospital late. So conversations like these are what is going to guide us in making sure that people really take a step, become a step ahead when finding certain symptoms that they find, whether it's fatigue, excessive bleeding, chronic infections, unexplained weight loss, that they really consult with treating doctors and really start asking the relevant questions. An unexpected weight loss could be because of many other reasons, but it's up to the patient to then obviously address or speak very firmly to doctors that are treating them to say, these are the symptoms that I'm seeing. What is it that you think we should be testing for? And I really think that the more conversations we have around blood diseases, the more conversations we have around blood cancer, and the more we understand that as African people, we are not excluded from being diagnosed with these conditions, we'll start asking relevant questions, start seeking relevant treatment, and start taking precautions that help us be able to fight blood disorders or to fight blood cancer. I don't think we'll be able to wipe blood cancer out of the stream of diseases that we have, but we can be able to build a formidable registry that helps us be able to fight blood cancer. Because if we look, and I think it's probably something we're going to address in the many questions that in our conversation, when you look at the fact that a patient has got a 30% chance of finding a matching donor within their siblings, it means that there's a 70% chance for them to be able to find a donor in an unrelated person.
Okay, so the statistics always threw you off, and that you can't, you're not even saying 50% chance where you say, okay, we're working on balance of probability that my siblings and my family can be donors. Now you're saying 70-30. Now you're depending more on strangers rather than your own family members, which is then could be quite scary. But before we go to that question, you spoke on fatigue, you spoke on excessive bleeding, weight loss. So are those the common symptoms that one must really not necessarily diagnose themselves, obviously, but to then seek out help to say, okay, I've been maybe monitoring this over a period of a month or so, but there's I'm constantly being fatigued. There's the excessive building. Do they have to exist all together at the same time, or can one exist and then you can then seek out the help?
Patients vary. So patients' body also react differently, but you can't, as a human, always be tired. So that's why we say that when somebody's always fatigued, that's a cause of concern. You can't have excessive bleeding. You can't always be bleeding. You can't be obtaining bruises on your body on a continuous basis. It means that something is wrong. It means that your body is not doing the functions that it's supposed to be doing. So that's why when we list those symptoms, those are the most common symptoms that we are seeing from patients who come through the system diagnosed with blood disorders or blood cancer.
Something that you mentioned, there's mostly, you find that in our communities, there'll be kids who say, oh, every time there's summer, they'll be bleeding excessively. Can we that take as a cause of concern? Or is it, okay, your body is just being normally reactive to the sun?
Yeah. So with patients that have come to the system, some have had nosebleeds.
Okay.
And a nosebleed every day is not okay. So I think as a community, we need to start moving away from making things that are not okay.
Yeah.
I would rather have people seek medical attention and seek help, rather understand that it is through the heat and you're not suffering from a blood disorder or a blood cancer, rather than to sit at home and have a child that continuously nosebleeds and you don't have an understanding of why it's happening.
I think the biggest thing I'm taking from what you say, that's how much we've normalized things. It's going to be like, oh, she's always tired. Oh, she bleeds all the time. And that's how we miss all those things, because they have become normal in our communities that, oh, this person is always like this. And we never pay attention, which is a cause for concern in how we look at things, especially within the Black community. In moving in with our questions, you mentioned that in the streamline of my family, there's a 30% chance that I might get a donor. And why is that the case?
I think because when we are looking for a blood stem cell donor, or when we are doing a matching process, we are looking for a genetic twin of a person. So we are looking for somebody who's genetically built the same as that patient. And that genetically could not sit within your own siblings. which is why we say there's a 30% chance that your siblings are a 100% match, and there's a 70% chance that genetically you will match an unrelated person.
Which turns the conversation around, because we've always believed that if we're siblings, we can always match up on things. Now, this becomes a twist. And I remember when we were on the conversation, when we were on the match, they mentioned something around HLA. Is that what you're talking about when you say it's the genetic match? Okay.
So when we are looking at the reading, we do HLA typing, which is a genetic reading of the donor and of the patient. So before the search is done for a patient, a doctor will conduct an HLA typing to be able to genetically have an understanding of the reading of the patient. And we take those results and we run them through our database, and we are then able to find a matching donor for a patient.
Okay. Does the matching, or rather the finding, also works like how sometimes it works with blood, that blood is more difficult to find, and in the different categories?
It's another important note to make, that a blood stem cell transplantation does not depend on the blood type of the donor or of the patient. Remember that earlier on I explained that how we harvest the stem cells from the donor is that we draw blood from the one arm, and the blood runs through a stem cell separating machine that separates the stem cells. So we are not dealing here with the blood cell as per se, but we're dealing with the stem cell, which is why we do HLA typing of the patient and of the donor for us to have a clear understanding of the matching concept. Then we are able to say that we are able, or the doctor, more or less, the transplant doctor will be able to take stem cells from the donor and transplant them to the patient.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Glenn, for that clarification. So let's say I'm here, I'm watching on the live, and I feel like, hey, I need to be part of the fight. What is the process of donation?
Before we get to the process of donation, I think we'll need to look at what is the process of becoming a donor. It's very easy. Our requirements are that people are between the ages of 18 and 55, that they are healthy and leading a healthy lifestyle, which means that they are not on any chronic medication or have chronic illnesses, and that they are willing to help any patient in need. And we say that because, as we had mentioned earlier, the statistics in terms of patients finding sibling matches and finding matches in unrelated donors, it's very important that people who sign up to be donors have or are willing to help any patient in need. We always encourage our donors not to sign up for a particular patient, because there is a possibility that you might not match the patient you're signing up for, but match another patient who is in need. Okay,
I was about to ask that question, because I think with our country and history, the conversation around race issue is still one where we a bit tiptoeing around it. So I could imagine someone finding out that their match is of a different race, that they might have certain feelings around that race. So the conversation, I would really want you to emphasize on that issue, because it speaks on the conversation that we need to at some point have as a country as a whole around race relations. But at this point, when we're helping our people, I don't think we'd want to get to a point where race becomes the blockage from someone getting a blood stem cell.
So I think one of the important factors of why we have such conversations, or why we avail ourselves to hold these conversations with people, is to provide a clear understanding to everybody who listens, or anybody who gets a chance to be part of these conversations, where we highlight the process of blood stem cell transplantation. And there's a 99.9% chance that if you're looking for a genetic match of X Hlongwane, you are most likely going to find it in his ethnic group, which is why we encourage people of African descent to become donors, because as I explained, that we are seeing more and more African people being diagnosed with blood diseases, more and more people being diagnosed with blood cancer. And when we start searching for a stem cell transplant, sometimes it's often too late. Because there's lots of work that needs to be put into trying to find a match for somebody, which is why we always encourage people to say, let us not wait till a blood disorder or a blood cancer finds a position on your doorstep. Let us not wait for a blood cancer or a blood disorder to be the doormat on the entry of your house before we really start acting. Let us have an understanding that as society, that we really have to find it within ourselves to start being able to help.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow it is you, the next day it is the son of the person on the call, the following day it is the father of the person on the call. So there's no telling where and when it might rain, but when it does rain, let us be able to say we are able to assist and save and become a beacon of hope and help people who are suffering at the time.
I think before we also go through the process of donating, would Xolani please paint a picture for us as to how long a person can wait before they receive a donor, or how long is roughly the waiting period has been like, especially within the Black communities, when a person finds themselves in this situation?
We've had patients who have literally looked for a month and they found donors. We've had patients who we're going to a year and we're still in search to find donors for. When we deal with Caucasian patients, the search is generally not as long as it is for African patients, for Indian patients, for colored patients. And that's simply because we do not have enough of these donors on the registry to be able to help the patients who are in need.
And I'm hopeful that today's conversation will change that dynamic the more we're having this conversation, because on a face value, I could say maybe it's because of lack of information, lack of understanding of what is this and how can I be of help. And just something that I would like you to explain to us, as I was reading on the pamphlet of DKMS, is that I can be in South Africa and be a match to someone in a different country. So this seems like also the donation knows no borders, and I could be here and have as someone from Brazil being a match for me.
So DKMS Africa forms part of a global entity. We form part of the global DKMS family, and we have representation in 5 continents and 7 countries. And this purely allows us to be able to provide the service where we are able to then find donors around the globe to be able to help our patients who are in need. But whilst that is the case, we still need to drum the fact that people of African descent will sit primarily in South Africa. They will sit primarily in Africa. which means that we need to focus on, yes, we form part of a global family, which is beautiful, but it still means that we need to focus on forming a solid base within our borders first to be able to provide the service that we want to provide. If you look at the fact that South Africa from the previous census has a population of 66+ million, and we still have not been able to reach 1 million of donors recruited in the registry. It means that for every 72 seconds when a patient is diagnosed, we are missing on an opportunity to say that a donor is here waiting for you should you need one. And that's the hope that we need to be providing to people who are diagnosed with blood diseases. That's the hope that we need to be providing to families who have got people who are diagnosed with blood diseases, because that's the hope that keeps people going. That's the hope that makes the fight against blood diseases and blood disorders very easy, manageable, and that people are actually able to cope simply because that they know that there is a Messiah waiting there to be able to help.
Yeah, there's a good Samaritan out there waiting to help. I could imagine how it feels that because we quick to also go into the internet, you finding out that you have this disease and you're realizing that the situation is so bleak because of few numbers of people who have donated, and how that will also demoralize a person because there's so much pain, and they, on the other hand, they don't see hope that there could be a person that would be of help at that very moment. I cannot imagine how a person would feel in that situation. And that's why I want us, when we're having this conversation, to be really much on the side of this could be saving someone's life. It could happen to anyone. Glenn, please take us through the process of you've registered and now maybe you're a match for someone. What is the process of the donation?
So before we look at the process of a donation again, is I think once you've completed your application form or your registration form, and we've looked that you tick the boxes of what we mentioned earlier on, 18 to 55, leading a healthy lifestyle, willing to help any patient in need. We also need to make it very clear for our listeners and for people who might be able to watch this live at a later stage that the process to become a donor is so much easier. We give you 3 swabs, and the swabs literally go in the inside of your mouth, and you rub up and down whilst turning your swab for a minute. Inside on your left-hand side for 1 minute. You take another swab, you swab the right-hand side for 1 minute. You take your third swab and you swab the top and the bottom of your front mouth. And once those have been done, they are then collected and they are shipped through to the lab where we'll do HLA typing. And if really to become a donor is so easy, I do not see the reason why people shouldn't become donors. And the process to then, when you have been identified as a donor, which is one of the things we always highlight to people, that the importance of completing your form correctly for us is gold. Because when we make contact with donors, we look at the forms that they would have completed. And it's from there that we are able to then communicate with the donor and let them or make them aware that they've been identified as a matching donor for a patient. We did highlight earlier the importance of looking after our donors. So when you've been identified as a matching donor for a patient, you will be contacted by our medical department. They will make you aware of the fact that you've been identified as a donor. You will then be required to go through and do a full blood count. Remember, the stem cells live on your bloodstream. So therefore, we require our donors to be 100% clear. Once that is done, also to support the fact that we look after our donor, a full medical examination is done on the donor prior to them being passed on to go through to become or to harvest stem cells for a patient. And this is all done on the basis of the fact that we really, as DKMS Africa, take pride in looking after our donors. And any donor that has been identified at the testing phase of not being in good health cannot go through with the donation process. Once you've passed all the required tests, we then send you through to a hospital where we then do the necessary procedure of drawing blood from the one arm, letting the blood go through a stem cell separator, which separates the stem cells into a stem cell bag, and the rest of the blood flowing back to the other arm. And I think we also need to mention the fact that once the process has started where the donor has been identified and they are going through the process of providing their stem cells, the patient on the other end is being conditioned to be able to receive the stem cells, which is why we always say that a well-informed, committed donor is what we are looking for, because you cannot halfway through the process then turn around and say you don't want to be a donor, because you are even endangering more the life of somebody who has already been battling a life-threatening disease.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Xolani that one needs to really think about the decision that they're making and be intentional about it from the beginning till the end of the process, because there's a lot of stakes. I mean, there's a family waiting on the other end that their person will come home in a better condition. So unless a life-threatening decision that will make you withdraw, would like that someone sees through the process. Okay, but Xolani, you've mentioned the test and the checkups that need to be done. Who is taking care of the cost for all of this?
DKMS Africa covers all the costs that are involved during the donation, actually the recruitment process and the donation process. Becoming a blood stem cell donor is at no cost to the donor. The only thing that we are looking for is we are looking for young African people who are committed to fighting the cause, to help us be able to change the statistics, to change the narrative, to be able to allow and afford African people good systems where they're actually able to be transplanted.
Thank you very much, Xolani. We already have one person on our Facebook Live that say, I want to save people's lives. How do people register in order for them to receive the swabs and send them back and start the process of even trying to see if they can be registered as donors?
So COVID has taught us quite a lot. And it is through COVID that we were able to come up with solutions that make us be able to reach donors far and wide in the country. Anybody who would like to become a stem cell donor who ticks the boxes, they just need to go onto our website, which is www.dkms-africa.org, and click the register button. They will complete their application form online. And once that has come through and is filtered into our systems, we are then able to provide or deliver the by courier, the swab kit, which has clear directions in terms of how to use the swab kit. And we again collect the swab kit from the donor's house. And all of this is done at no cost. We carry the cost for it. So if the process is just as easy, I again want to say I'm calling on the many people who are listening to us to say, you know, it's a food for thought. But let's not miss an opportunity to change somebody's life. Let's register, let's become donors. let's be able to give hope.
Yeah, definitely, Bukolani. From my end also, I'm just appealing to everyone listening from home that you also share this information to as many people as you can. You can share the link, copy the link and share to your friends, your family members, but also start having the conversation within your family members. To those that joined really late, I mentioned something that I don't remember in my whole life, as old as I am, that I've encountered with anyone with cancer. But that is alarming because I don't think we are that lucky. But there's a greater chance of that these things are never detected. There's a misdiagnosis, because we've had family members who day in and day out are going in and out of hospital, but there's no reason, or doctors are not finding a reason. We could, with such information as this, and start turning the conversation into the other way to say, hey, this is might be some of the things we might look at. Again, it's upon us to start having the conversation within our friends, within our families, and until, like Bukolani is saying, let's not wait for things to get into our doorstep. Let's be proactive in these things. And proaction comes from conversation. It's only through people having information that they can change the status quo. Bukolani, before we close, any last words you have for us, and encourage us as to why this is an important fight for all of us?
Yeah, I think it's an informed society makes the best decisions. It's important for us to have such conversations. We say thank you to you guys for inviting us and for providing us this platform. Please do it again on another day so that we are able to continuously have such engagements. It's an honest truth. We are not ever going to be able to wipe blood diseases or blood disorders, blood cancer off the planet Earth, but we can be able to provide the assistance that is needed. And it is simple. It is only through becoming blood stem cell donors. It's an easy process. One recovers immediately after donating. You provide a patient with a second chance at life. You provide a family an opportunity to spend with their loved ones again. It's a day procedure. You are in, you are out, you live your life as normal. I couldn't understand what more we would be looking for or what more we would need to convince ourselves to become donors. And I really want to encourage everybody who's listening, if you do have any unanswered questions, that you do give us a call. The number is 0800 12 10 82. Call us. One of our consultants will be able to speak to you. We'll be able to make you understand better. We'll be able to provide you with collateral or information that will be able to give you a better understanding so that you can be able to make a better decision.
Thank you, Bukolani. Can you please once again repeat your number and the website?
So the number is 0800 12 10 82, and the website is www.dkms-africa.org. And I see on your chat, somebody has gone to say, it's concerning, I'm always fatigued. And I think it's very important, as we had mentioned earlier on, that people need to have it checked out. But again, people need to get proper sleep. People need to get proper rests, but don't be fatigued all your life. It's an opportunity for you to visit the doctor and say, listen, this is what I'm encountering. Where do I stand? And have it checked up, and we can have a better society tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely on the sleep part. We live in times where people, I feel like to some extent, they're stretching themselves too thin, trying to make a living, which is understandable with the current economic times. but having a good rest is important, because at least you can be able to differentiate to say, I've been having a good rest, but I'm constantly fatigued. Then there must be a problem. So it's very important to take care of ourselves, but also be very mindful around kids also, because I remember one of the people, the lady was giving a testimony on the launch, is how it occurred through fatigue to a child. So I know in most of the time, I don't know if it's the same in other communities, but growing up in a Xhosa family, recently Kaya was making a joke on how we've always been asked to be hyperactive, like extroverted. So if you feel you seem like a dull person, you're like, no. So those are things that we must also be looking out for as concern. You're looking at the child constantly coming home and sleeping. You are happy as a parent that they're not in the streets, but there might be a bigger problem that what meets the eye. So from us today, Bukalani, we're very, very much thankful that you came through and we had this conversation, and that we're going to continuously knock at your door to say, we need more of those conversations. Like you said, an informed society makes better decision. We cannot have this conversation once and think that, oh, all is well and things will work out, but we need to continuously have the conversation. And to people at home, thank you very much for taking your hour and listen to this conversation. I hope it will save your life. I hope it will save your loved one. Have the conversation when you get at work tomorrow with your colleagues. At school, if you're a teacher, have the conversation with the children. It's a very important conversation we need to have. Our people can still find help. They do not have to die. They do not have to suffer. We can have help as much as we can. But also the last thing is to appeal to everyone. Go and register. One day you might be the good Samaritan that changes the course of someone's life. And from us, the Wesley Guild, under the Methodist Church of South Africa, we thank you very much for tuning us today. Until next time, it is good night. Please take care of yourself. There's still COVID. There's so many other diseases. We still need you to change South Africa. So please take care of yourself, good health, exercise, walk a kilometer or 2 a day, 3 times a week. It can take the doctor away. From me, it's a good night. Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna drop the call.